content marketing strategy for businesses and how businesses can create more content, because at the end of the day, we know that content is the most important when it comes to reaching your audiences and really making your story seem more relevant and more important to them. So yeah, I'd love to pass the mic over to Ray and kind of go from there.
Sure. Yep. So I'm Ray Cornell. I run Cornell Content Marketing. We do content creation, copywriting, and multimedia content creation, meaning like social media graphics, lead magnets, videos, website design, all of that good stuff for businesses. We mostly specialize in B2C and particularly the subscription industry. And I'd say what makes us different is all of my educational background and pre-marketing and professional background is in psychology. So I got a master's in psychology, or I'm sorry, a bachelor's in psychology, a master's in professional clinical counseling, and another master's in criminology. And so all of that background is really infused into every piece of content that we create, because we take a very human-centric, emotional, psychological perspective to everything that we create. So we have all those kind of psychological principles infused into our copy, our blog content, our website pages, all of that.
Yeah, and being like on that psychology note, it is so important to really understand how your customer thinks to design content for them. Like understanding the psychology of other people is so critical when creating content, because you have to, because I see a lot of business owners, they create content for themselves that what they would watch, but they don't necessarily create it for their audience. And it really comes down to not assuming anything. And it also comes down to like making sure that you are designing it for your audience and understanding that psychology. So I bet that psychology and understanding that for you must be a huge, huge advantage when you're creating content.
It is, and you're exactly right. A lot of the companies that come to us for copy and content, they have been doing things in the past where they're just thinking, okay, what do we want to tell people? What news do we have? What product do we want to promote? They're thinking of it from a them-centric perspective. And so what we do when we work with them is flip that around and say, what does your audience need? How are they feeling when they land on your website? What are the beliefs that they need to take on in order to click that buy now button? What are the pain points that they're having, and what words carry the specific connotation that they need to hear or read in order to believe that you are the solution that they need right then and there and that they can trust?
Yeah, that's great. How do you typically, when you go up to a business, how do you typically structure and get the ideas flowing to create more content for them? Because a lot of businesses say, I don't know what to create. I don't know what to, like, all these different things. How do you typically get businesses to really understand and get the ideas flowing when it comes to creating this content for them?
That's a great question. And I think ideation is probably one of the biggest things that businesses struggle with. And there are a number of different techniques that we use to just basically have a nonstop flow of content ideas. So one of those ways is SEO. Now, I talk a lot about psychology and emotional connotation and word choice and addiction and all of that, but SEO is also a huge part of content creation. And it's also very tied to human behavior, because SEO data is a derivative of what are actual humans typing into the search bar. So if we start there and we see what has a high volume, and depending on the company's budget and their current reach, their current reputation, their page authority, their site authority, all of that, that gives us a range of difficulty that we're able to shoot for in those SEO keywords. Those keywords are a huge source of content ideas. We use both short keywords and long tail keywords. Long tail keywords are things like, what are the, or what is a, they're usually questions. And then short form keywords are what we're most familiar with, 1 or 2 words. So SEO is a big one. Another big one is actually going into the places where your customers are, where they're looking for answers. If they're in Facebook groups, if they are complaining about a product that's similar to yours on an Amazon review, that can yield a lot of information about content you can create, ways to position your brand and make sure that you're addressing those pain points that you may not have realized that your audience has, but there it is on the 1-star Amazon review, glaring that I care about this. You can tell them that your product doesn't have that problem or it solves that problem.
Yeah, that's so great. When it comes to doing your keyword research to finding out more content, how do you use like Google Keyword Planner? How do you usually structure and go out and do the keyword research to go and find this new content to create?
Sure. So there are a number of different ways. I'm not a huge fan of Google Keyword Planner. And the reason for that is it's a really weird tool because it actually asks you to come to the table with the keywords that you want to rank for. But usually the problem that people have is, I don't know what keywords I should be ranking for. So it's kind of a chicken or the egg situation, and Google Keyword Planner doesn't really help so much with that. So what we usually do is we'll have a meeting with our client. We'll say, okay, in a perfect world, what would you like to rank for? And usually they can come up with 5 to 10, sometimes even 20 keywords. Then we take those and we go to tools like Mangools. So Mangools has a great tool called KW Finder. We put in their ideal keywords and it gives us all the variations, all the related keywords, all of the questions people are typing in that have those keywords. And then we're able to see a side-by-side comparison of their ideal keywords and all the other options that are out there that may have a higher volume, a lower difficulty, or maybe that we just didn't even think of before that people are typing in. Another tool that you can use is Moz Explorer. That one's a great one if you know that you have competitors who are ranking for the keywords you want to rank for. You can put your competitor's URL in there, do a root domain search, and find out everything your competitors are ranking for.
Yeah, that's great. And when it comes to ranking for and trying to beat out your competitors, domain authority is a big importance when it comes to establishing authority when it comes to Google and to like really push up in the rankings.
Yeah.
How do you establish that domain authority, and how do you really push and gain more traffic to your site? And where do you push more traffic, and how do you get that domain authority?
Oh, this is probably the trickiest one because there are so many different strategies, and some of them are very authentic, organic, and others are kind of sleazy and underhanded. Like, I don't want to say underhanded, but they don't feel good. Like you're paying other websites to put a link to your site on their page. And so a lot of these pages that boast really high traffic, things like Yelp and directories and things like that, they're like, pay, so that we can put a link on our site saying that you're an authority in this particular keyword we're going to link, and then you have to hope that that works, and now you're out all this money. So that's one strategy that people have been using since I'd say the late 90s. It's really been that whole pay to have links on the pages strategy. I don't like doing that. We like to go the organic route, and the way to do that, as simply as I can put it, is just have really high quality content and share it. So a lot of people, what they'll do is they'll create great blog posts, they'll create great lead magnets, webinars, those sorts of things, and then they just hope that they get picked up in the search engine. But you have to actively share those with your email list, share it on Facebook, LinkedIn, Pinterest even, Twitter, anywhere that your audience is, and drive that traffic back. And the more you send your content out, the more people are going to see it, the more they're going to share it. Make sure all of your content is shareable. And it's that share worthiness and allowing other people to use your content as a resource that will, in time, build up your page authority and your domain authority, because trusted sites are linking back to your content. Now, content marketing is a long game. It's not something that you can pay someone to do it for 2 months and then boom, you're going to have this massive transformation. That's not the case. True. It usually takes minimum 6 months to start seeing the results. But the great thing about content marketing is it's exponential. Once you hit that threshold where your content's starting to be seen, people are talking about it, commenting on it, sharing it, then that growth just skyrockets.
Yeah, and it's because content's a brand game. It's all about building brand, and that takes time. It does. It's completely separate from sales. There's a huge difference between sales and marketing. Sales is short term, but you're gonna see not as high results. But brand, when you're building that brand and people start knowing who you are, like if like you don't they don't have to purchase right then. Like
Right.
you don't have to make them purchase immediately, because once they recognize that you are a brand, they might purchase a year from now, and they might be your biggest purchase ever. But it comes down to people actually recognizing that you are a brand, and that starts with content.
Yeah.
That's why you don't see that huge gain when you create your first piece of content, or your third or your 10th or your 100th piece of content may not have a lot of traffic. But eventually, it's just exponential. Like you said, it goes 1, 3, 5, and then it just keeps growing as people start knowing who you are. And also having that word of mouth aspect being a part of it. If you gain a lot of, let's say you don't have a big audience. Let's say you have a very niche audience, but they're very high quality. They're going to be spreading and talking about you all the time just through word of mouth, not even on your social posts. And those are the best type of people to have. I would rather have 1,000 super niche quality people rather than 100,000 kind of like, oh yeah, they heard of me kind of thing.
Yeah.
You would rather have high quality, because those people are going to always interact with you and spread you more than any of these kind of side like like, I don't know what the word is, like kind of like walkers. They just like kind of walk past your business. They kind of heard of you, but that's basically it. So that's what I think. What do you think about that?
Yeah, absolutely. You're totally right. And the other piece of that is when you do tap into that niche audience, you never know which one piece of content is going to be the one that goes,
Sure.
whoa, everyone I know in my industry, everyone I know in my field has to read this article, has to watch this video, has to listen to this podcast. You never know which one that's going to be.
True.
And so for some people, that can kind of feel like a gamble where it's, why are we putting so much money into this when it's only going to take one piece to really land with that audience? But the other thing about content marketing is it also enables sales. So you mentioned how sales is very short term and it's a hustle. It's a pretty much constant hustle for businesses. But when you're doing content marketing correctly, it enables your sales team. So people feel informed, they feel connected, they feel like they know your brand before they even hop on that sales call or land on that sales page. And then once they're there, if you have kind of that human component to your sales, where usually that's more in B2B, you're doing the sales calls over the phone, things like that, that sales team then has this huge library of content to say, you know what, I know exactly what you're going through. We just did a blog post about this a couple months ago. Let me send that free resource to you. And it's kind of relationship building in the same way. So for those companies that kind of hyper focus on sales and they think, oh, let's not spend time on content marketing, they really go together. And the more you do content marketing, the more you're strengthening that sales team. And you never know when those posts are just going to strike a chord with your target audience, and then all of a sudden you're the go-to.
And you're so right when it's so important to test these. Like, you never know which one's going to take off.
Yeah.
And you really want to test new things, new formats, new ways to communicate with your audience, because those are the ones that might do well. You have no idea until you test it. You can't speak for your audience. You can't say, oh, my audience, there's no way they would like that. You test. You say, you give it to them and then say, oh, it didn't perform well. I was right. Like, most likely it will not, but you have to actually try it. You have to actually take that risk and test out your content, because you never know which one may perform better. So it's so important.
And to that point about testing, you also, for some companies, especially those that are maybe in the startup phase or they're in that growth phase where budget is really limited, instead of just going full on into creating content, you can do audience surveys to find out, hey, when you have a problem, where do you go? Do you go to Google? Do you go to YouTube? Do you go to a colleague? Do you go to LinkedIn? Do you post in a group? Where do you go? What are you struggling with? How do you prefer to consume content? Do you prefer podcasts or videos or blog content or ebooks? Tell me what you prefer. What's your tolerance threshold for email? Do you like when companies email you once a week, once a day? Not at all. Ask. If you don't know, just
Yeah.
ask your audience,
Yeah.
and you'll have so much valuable information that will really solidify the direction your content marketing strategy needs to go in, so you're not wasting any time or resources.
Yeah. And it's important to understand within that person exactly what you're saying. What is that person's strength when it comes to creating content? For me, I like doing video because I'm not a very good content writer. I'm just not. I know I am. So I'm much better on video rather than than writing or than doing voice. I like video because I can do voice and I can do video and kind of get everything down in one go. So I like doing that, but other people, they may love writing more. They may love any particular content more, and it's important to know your strengths. And almost everyone has one of those strengths. It's either you're good at writing, good at video, or you're good at voice. Usually one of those you're going to be decent at. And it's important to understand that because you can create some form of content within that, and where you can even pictures, you can be a graphic designer and only do pictures for all that matters.
Yeah.
But it's important to know that any of those skill sets that I talked about, that your strengths, that you play on that way you can create content and speak to your audience through one of those skill sets. And since they're your strengths, it should come naturally. It should come easy to you, but you have to try. Like, you never know if you're a good writer until you actually try. You never know if you're like, I hear people say all the time, I'm not good on video, and they've never been on video before. You don't know. It's exactly coming down to testing. You don't know yourself until you try it. So it's so important to keep trying and testing all these different aspects, play on those strengths, and that way you can reach your customer and create a ton more content by actually playing on those strengths and learning those skills.
You're absolutely right. And that's a really good point about content creation process. So I am a huge proponent of repurposing your content. So for example, we're on video right now. This could be turned into a podcast. That podcast could be transcribed and created into a piece of blog content. That blog post could be broken up into different snippets that then become social media posts, all from one video recording. And you can do the same thing with any type of content that you create. You can then translate that into all the other media so that you're reaching people who, it's funny. My husband loves to watch YouTube videos. Watching videos. I would much rather read a 2,000 word blog post than watch a 2-minute video. So you're going to have audiences who consume content differently, which means if you have one piece of content and you translate it into all those different types, you're not going to be hitting people with the same message. It's not like you're just repeating yourself. You're actually just reaching more people with that one touch point.
Yeah. Like, and you're so right. Each person, even your customers, like, you may only produce video, but maybe most of your audience likes reading text.
Yeah.
So it's important to create all these types of piece of content in different formats and not just stick to one format. If you have text, try videos, try podcasts, try something else. And it's really important to diversify your content so that way you can reach the most amount of people, because some people may prefer text, some people may prefer video. Because what's going to happen after this recording finishes, I'm going to take one valuable clip, I'm going to post it on LinkedIn, post it on YouTube, and format it to each platform. And then I'm going to take that transcript, post it on my website, and then I'm going to take the audio from this, and then I'm going to put it on all the podcasting platforms. So out of one clip, I just produced 7 pieces of content on all these platforms, and it comes super easy. So it really comes down to like providing and diversifying your content as much as you can. And I find that the easiest for me to be in video because I can really segment it out and diversify my content from there. So when it comes to your content strategy, try to find that really pillar piece of content where you can grab tons of videos from and really where you can diversify and push all your content from there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And I'm curious, where do you see the most traffic to your blog post. I've been very fascinated about Google News. I've
Mm.
been seeing a lot of traffic through there. I'd love to hear your thoughts on, is the best traffic getting through Google AdWords? Is it Google News? Or is it just typical Google search, organic? Where do you see the most uptake when it comes to traffic on your blog posts?
Yeah, that's a good point. So, or actually, a good question. So, you're going to hate me for this answer, but it depends. Depends on who your audience is. If you're speaking to a younger audience, maybe 20s, early 30s, and depending on, again, what your product is, what your service is, your audience may be more likely to be found on Instagram or on Facebook. If your audience is more the, 55-year-old white male who's been a professional in a white collar industry for the last 30 years, probably going to find him on LinkedIn. So it really depends on where your audience likes to hang out. But I think the place where all those, if you kind of picture it like a Venn diagram, the place where all those different population demographics overlap is really Google. Everyone types things into Google, no matter if when they're looking on that search page, did they decide to click on a YouTube video or an Instagram post or a LinkedIn profile or a website page. No matter what they end up choosing to click on, they always type into Google. So making sure that your SEO is really strong, that's always the crux of any content marketing, in my opinion. The other great thing about Google is you get a lot of analytics. Google Analytics is free. You can set that up on your website, see what traffic is coming your way. Where are you losing people? Are they bouncing off quickly? Are they spending only 15 seconds on your page, or is your session length actually closer to 2 minutes? If so, that's great. All of that information translates into human behavior, which is really important to give you those insights into how your content's performing.
Yeah, on that Google Analytics note, how do you typically structure your strategy about checking Google Analytics? Like, let's say you see one blog post that does really well. Do you say, okay, I'm going to create more content like around that topic? How do you typically go into Google Analytics? How do you read that? Because there's a lot of data in Google Analytics. You're seeing demographic data, you're seeing bounce rate, the seconds, you're seeing how the customer journey looks. How do you typically look at Google Analytics to make actual content decisions? What are your KPIs and what metrics do you use when looking at Google Analytics?
Sure, that's a good question. So Google Analytics, in my opinion, is a really great indicator of user experience. So there are a lot of variables that go into each piece of content. So first you have to compare apples to apples. So let's say you have two blog posts. One you share it out on LinkedIn and Facebook. The other you put out in a marketing email and maybe on Twitter. You can't compare the stats of those two posts in the exact same way because you didn't treat them the same way. So your traffic numbers are going to be skewed. So making sure that you're not reading into the numbers more than what's actually there is a huge first piece. Now, assuming that you are doing the exact same thing with all of your content, let's say you write a blog post, you send it out to your email list, you put it on Facebook, you put it on LinkedIn, and you put it on Medium. If you're doing that for all of your content, that's when you can start to derive meaning from the numbers. And in that, what I like to look at is traffic. Also, what sorts of devices are people looking at your content on? Are most of your people coming on via mobile? If so, you have to make sure that your website, your content, even the number of sentences per paragraph in your blog posts, you have to make sure that all of those pieces are optimized for mobile viewing. Otherwise, your content might be stellar, but if you have a paragraph that's actually, 8 lines long when you're looking on a desktop, but on a mobile it is now 80 lines long, that's going to skew your user experience. And it may be that they don't want to continue just scrolling and scrolling and scrolling through this wall of text, even though your content is really great. So
That's really interesting. Tell me more about how you optimize for mobile usage, because I see mobile usage becoming very, very important in the future as more people start reading their content through mobile. So this is actually a very, very relevant topic. So you talked about limiting sentences on your content creation.
yes.
How I do this on my blog posts. I actually like segment them out by titles. I just use big titles, big text, because I noticed a lot of people just title read. Like they just go down and just read the titles and then that's it. I love to get your thoughts. Do you typically put images in the middle of your content when it comes to mobile? Do you use a lot of titles? Do you use more paragraphs? How do you break that out? Yeah, I'd love to hear more strategy based on that mobile content.
Sure. Yeah. So when people are interacting with content via mobile, one, it has to load quickly. Whether someone is attached to Wi-Fi or they're using their cell phone network, it has to load so fast that they don't even have a chance to think, do I want to be here or not? Do I want to wait for this or not? So the load speed is just an absolute top priority.
Yeah.
Sometimes businesses will put these beautiful high resolution images into their content thinking, oh, this is going to look great, but they're only thinking about desktop. And then when it goes to mobile, it doesn't load. And then someone's like, I'm not going to wait 3 seconds. And they go back.
Yeah.
So load speed, number one. Number two is understanding the way that people read content online. People do not read every single line, every single word, every single paragraph. They skim. And so a lot of times companies will put blog content, lead magnets, even social posts out where all of the content is this one paragraph, or they have no breaks in between their text. So to your question of do you put images in? Yes, as long as they will load quickly, absolutely. Break up your text with images. I like to put one image every 250 to 300 words. And then within that text, also making sure that all of your headers and your subheaders are no more than one line across on a desktop, which means they'll probably be 2 to 3 lines on mobile. That improves readability, as well as making sure that your paragraphs are not, like I said, huge blocks of text, that they're actually, about 2 to 3 sentences, or on desktop, because most of us tend to write on desktop, so that's where I'm giving that frame of reference. They're not more than 4 lines. Like if you write your article in a Google Doc, make sure that it's 4 lines or less. That way, when you translate it over to mobile, it's actually about the size of the cell phone window, and people can see space on top and on bottom. Also leveraging bulleted lists, bold text to make key ideas stand out so that as people are skimming, they can see where they need to pay attention to the actual information they're looking for. Because the worst thing is for someone to come to your page, skim, 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 feel like, I didn't get anything out of this, and then leave. Because what that does is that tells, in a very subconscious way, that tells them that you either don't care about them or you don't care about the quality of your content. So therefore, you're not as much of a trustworthy brand as they would like you to be. Whereas if they go to your page and they go, oh, I was looking for the answer to this question, I found it, boom, done. They have these subconscious positive associations with your brand. All of a sudden, you're above the rest. So it's so important to maximize that user experience.
Wow, yeah, that's extremely valuable. And also when it comes, you're so right about the loading speed, because you can have the most beautiful website in the entire world, but if it takes a long time to load, no one's going to even see it. There's no bounce rate because no one's even loading your page, so they're not even coming through. So what I've been doing is I've been going through accelerated mobile pages, AMP pages, that on Google, and those have been really pushed in the rankings, especially on Google News, having those accelerated mobile pages and making it where the page loads it way faster than a typical loading page. So I've been enjoying that, to have those really fast load times. But yeah, you're so right. It's not important to have these really high res images. It's sometimes it's way more important to have lower quality images and having that faster load time, so that way people are actually seeing what the image is. The image isn't important anymore, and the quality of the image isn't important if no one's actually loading the image. So I would rather have 3 super low quality images than 1 super high res image that takes a long time to load. So it's really important to weigh your options, but most of the time you're going to always go with that low quality image, so your load time on your page is faster, because that's so vital.
Absolutely. And you still do need to have images. If you have just all text, people tend to not scroll. It's kind of like the same principle that TV shows and commercials use, where you don't have the same frame, the same camera angle, the same perspective for the entire 30 seconds of that commercial. It's changing about every 2 to 4 seconds, because the eye needs movement. The eye needs change in order to stay interested. So you still have to have those images on your page, But you're right. You need to make sure that they're loading first and foremost. And also, you don't have to spend tons of money on images. The image almost doesn't even have to be related to what you're talking about. I'm sure we've all seen articles where we're like, why do they have a picture of a turtle in this article? Stocks?
Yeah.
That's the connection. But it's all about that psychology and that emotional experience that people have on your page. If they see a picture of a puppy or some, mind map that's really interesting or something that makes them feel happy or satisfied in some way, as opposed to something that is depressing or scary or alarming, they're going to have those emotional connotations associated with your brand. So you have to be really careful about the types of images that you choose, not necessarily that they fit in exactly with the content, but that they're making your readers feel good.
Yeah, that's great. And also, what I've noticed is how people are ranking on Google, they're actually creating these LinkedIn articles. And for me, LinkedIn articles, they don't like from LinkedIn itself, I don't get very much traffic rather than a video or a actual feed post or anything else. I get way more traffic on that because actually you can create a ton of text-based feed posts. And they do super well on LinkedIn. What platforms do you typically see are great for traffic to your blog posts? I've noticed that Twitter has because I feel like people are a lot more likely to read on Twitter, so they're likely
Mhm.
to go to blog posts. And I figure that like LinkedIn and Twitter are kind of the two like article reading platforms for the best traffic. That's what I've seen. I'd love to hear your thoughts on what platforms may be the best. I know it depends on the audience, but I'd
Right.
love to hear, what do you typically see? What platforms do better when it comes to reading articles and sending traffic to your blogs?
Sure. So for B2B, definitely LinkedIn and Twitter. You're right. Those two platforms really lend themselves well to people being receptive to clicking links that are going to take them off the platform because they know that it'll either open up a new window or they can come back to where they were previously very easily. Now, something like Instagram, people don't go to Instagram to read articles. They go to
True.
Instagram to look at pretty pictures. And the fact that Instagram doesn't allow you to put URLs in your content makes it so you always have to say link in bio, and then you have to have a link tree, and then you have to, all these different steps. So
Yeah.
if you're going to be promoting written content, then Instagram probably isn't your target platform. But if you are trying to reach that B2C audience, that's where you want to go to either Pinterest or Facebook. People tend to now use Facebook as almost like a news feed. They think that Facebook equals news, and even though we know there's all sorts of proof that that's not the case, all sorts
Yeah.
of scandals and craziness, but that user behavior is, I'm coming to this feed to see what's new, what's going on, what's up. And people do want to click things that will take them into that kind of sub window within Facebook. And the other reason I say Pinterest is because Pinterest lends itself really well to being that search engine, and it's a very problem solution platform.
Yeah.
People go to Pinterest, especially if you're a B2C company, for solutions to, what do I do for my daughter's birthday? Or I'm having to work from home, I need some organization tips. Or all my kids are now home for spring break. How do I keep this place clean? Things like that. Depending on what your product or service is, you can get a lot of traffic from Pinterest because that's where people are going to find solutions, and they want to take that next step to click over to read more about your particular solution.
Well, yeah, that's great. And what I've noticed also on LinkedIn, so I don't get a lot of traffic through LinkedIn articles, but I would noticed are people that LinkedIn articles are ranking really well on Google.
Yes.
So people will actually rank their LinkedIn articles on Google, use LinkedIn domains authority to rank their articles on Google. So they have really high volume. And you can even put your website, like your website link at the bottom or something, and gain all that traffic from Google itself on your blogs as well. So maybe if you have that blog strategy, maybe it's important to put it up on LinkedIn and use that domain authority because it's ranking well in Google. So you can definitely utilize that and send them to your website and have a lot of traffic that way.
Absolutely. So anytime you're doing blog content, my number one recommendation is always post natively. Always post to your native domain. but then repurpose that content on LinkedIn and or Medium. I personally prefer LinkedIn. Medium, it really had its kind of like peak a few years ago, and people are starting to wane away from it, but it's still an option if you do want to do a third platform. LinkedIn, you're completely right, it does get indexed by Google. So it's really important in your company profile, in your personal profile, and in any content you put on LinkedIn that you are using important keywords. And then within your content, especially if you're doing LinkedIn articles, what I like to do is have a little paragraph in italics, either at the top or the bottom of the article, that says originally published on, and link back to your actual website to start building in those backlinks and sending people to where they can learn more.
Wow. Yeah, that's great. Earlier, you talked about having an email, really creating an email list and then sending them to your blogs. How do you curate a email list, and how do you create a very effective newsletter for your blog to really get lots of traffic to your blogs and to your website? How do you typically do that?
Yeah, so within the newsletter, the biggest mistake that I see companies who are doing content marketing make is they don't tell people that they're creating all this great content. They see content creation as a way to get new eyes on their brand. But the other beautiful thing about content marketing is that it's also a relationship builder. So telling your existing list, the people who already know about you, maybe they opted in for a lead magnet, they joined you on a webinar, you had a free call with them and you added them to your list. There are a number of different ways to get people onto that list. But once they're there, you can't forget about them. So within that newsletter, making sure that you have things like a customized little blurb at the top that says, this is what's going on, this is what we're focusing on, this is how we're feeling about this particular issue in the world, making sure that you're speaking to them on that either peer or colleague level, depending on your relationship with your audience. And then going into, here's our latest podcast, here are the blogs that we suggest for you, here's our new product feature. One of the things that a lot of especially product-based companies do is they make their newsletters all about their products, and they include like 6 in there. Don't do that. Focus on one. What is your most popular product? What is the one that is most well received? What's the one that you have a sale going on right now that might tip people into being kind of like looky-loos and just watching what you're doing to actually, I think this is the time for me to try this. So having that combination of all the different types of content that you're creating, as well as calls to action that bridge people to whatever your sales process is. B2C, it's going to be buy now. B2B, it's going to be book this call or schedule a demo or whatever your funnel looks like.
Yeah, that's great. And we talked about the best practices when it comes to creating a mobile blog page. But what are your best practices and to actually put in the email? What, like, we talked about like really having those images and everything else in the blog post, but how do you structure a very effective email template to actually make it where your customer clicks in, reads your blogs, reads your content, the newest podcast, the newest blog post? How do you structure your email titles, your email templates to make it where you have the most effective click-through rate to get the most engagement on your blogs?
Yeah, good point. So with your email newsletters, you want to make sure that you're designing for a single vertical column. When you have multiple columns, like some people will put, 3 or 4 products all in a row side by side because it looks great on desktop. But then when you open it up on mobile, you've got this weird like wide scroll thing going on and it just doesn't look as good. Yeah. So making sure that you're designing for that vertical single column design, making sure that your text is very light and that you are not going too crazy with the graphics. So one thing that is kind of very old school that people do is their newsletter is a single image and they just put that image in the email and send it out. Well, if you're reading that on mobile, you're going to either see just the top left corner of it, or it's going to show up as this itty bitty teeny tiny image and you're like, what the hell is this?
Yeah.
Making sure that you are doing text-oriented emails, but also being very light on the text because people don't want to open up an email and just see a wall of text.
True.
Some email clients like Outlook, they really lend themselves to plain text email. But for the most part, anyone who's using Gmail, Hotmail, kind of like
Mhm.
those traditional, or I don't want to say traditional, mainstream um, email clients, those ones you can insert colors, images, more eye-catching elements to your email newsletters. So, for example, if you are selling products, make sure you include a product picture as your header image. Have a call out, what I call a call out. It's basically like a header right below that image. That is, what are they going to get out of reading this email? What do they care about? They may not care about your blogs. They may only start to care about them once they see, oh, this is the blog title, and I actually want to click and read into this. But is there any benefit to them to opening and reading that email? Like 50% off, or we have a new product, or we're bringing you new features, anything like that. What is the benefit to them? Again, it shouldn't be something where you go, okay, what do we want to tell people about? It should really be, what do people actually want from us? Do they want a discount? Do they want a new product? Did we solve a new pain point? Are we offering faster shipping? What's the benefit to them?
Yeah, and that just comes down to knowing your customer. That's the most important part of all of this.
Yeah.
When it comes to creating content, creating your emails, creating your email templates, it all comes down to knowing your customer and understanding that's what they want.
Yeah.
Do they want those discounts? Do they want all those aspects of your business, and providing that and letting them understand the story of your business. If you are a B2C company, they should understand who you are, what your business is about, and creating content that establishes that brand over a long period of time, because that is where you're going to see the most growth. Because a lot of businesses want to grow, but they just don't prioritize content. They just think it as a waste of time because they don't see that short-term gain. But content is a long-term play that where a lot of people come in. Like
Yeah.
Nike and North Face does not sell me these shirts. I go to their website and purchase them because of brand. I purchased it because of brand. So they didn't do it because of sales. So it's so important to always have brand, because that is where you're going to see the most effectiveness and get the most sales long term. Because the North Face spent a lot of money building up that brand, so that way that way people just go on their website and purchase from them. So
Yeah.
it's so important to have that brand in place and have that content strategy in place to create the most effective brand you can, because that's where you're going to see the most gain for your business.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and
Yeah.
it's all about building that relationship. And even though content doesn't always directly translate into sales, there's so many different variables that go into there where it's really hard to draw that direct connection.
Yeah.
62% of people have bought something based on a blog post alone. I've
Yeah.
done it myself. I was once reading a blog about blue light and the way it affects your brain. And, for those of us who work at our computers all day, every day, what we can do to minimize blue light exposure and the way it messes with our melatonin and things like that. And within that article, blue light glasses was hyperlinked. I clicked it. I bought a pair. I literally bought a product based on the blog post alone. Now,
Yeah.
that works mostly with lower priced products. So I think these glasses were like $22, something like that. So anything under about 100, you can see that really work, but it shouldn't be salesy. Your blog content should always be helpful, informative, supportive, encouraging, and you place the links in the right locations to make that logical next step conclusion of, here's all this great information, now go do something with it, like buy our product. You don't
Yeah.
tell them that, but you place it right there so that they draw that conclusion themselves.
Yeah. And it's so important on these businesses and products where the customer does need to be informed. You should be making more of that blog-based content, because exactly what you're saying, you converted because you read that blog that blue light is bad for you, and then they sold you glasses.
Yeah.
But I see a lot of products that are on Amazon, but they require a lot of knowledge and information to get across, which is hard to do on an Amazon product page. But it's important to create content if you are one of those products that need a lot of information and for the customer to be informed about, that you should be creating that blog content. So when people do search it on Google, they understand and your blog posts come up. And you should be creating content that describes so your customers can understand what your product is about and new people to understand why they need your product. Because it's so important that, like, if you do have these type of products, that you are informing them so the customer understands how and why they need to purchase your product. And it all comes down to content.
Absolutely. And that's really where, we talked before about how content can really serve as a sales enablement tool. And that's exactly it, where talk to your sales team, talk to the people who are actually moving the product or selling the service, and say, what are the questions that people keep asking you? What do they need to know? What do your customers need to understand, believe before they make that purchase? Each piece of that can become a piece of content, whether it's a video. I keep harping on blog content because that's what I love doing the most.
Yeah.
There's a blog post or a podcast or a piece of video. What do they need to know and understand about your product or service in order for them to feel like they're making the best decision for themselves? And then you mentioned Amazon. There's what's called A+ content on
Yep.
Amazon, where you can do that exact same thing. If you have a highly specialized product that you're selling on Amazon, maybe it's not even obvious from just looking at the picture what it is and what it does and why you need it. That's where that A+ content comes into play, where you can outline steps on how it's used, and here's this benefit, and you have the visuals and the text all in one place. It's really important to put a lot of time and effort into that content.
Yeah, that's great. And we talked about Amazon. Just putting you on the spot. Sorry about this, but have you ever heard of the Amazon the Amazon recommended program? I forgot what it's called. The editorial section of Amazon. I'm just curious. This is just a purely curious question. Have you ever heard of
No,
the Amazon editorial program?
no, I haven't. And I'm assuming you're referencing where Amazon says, this is Amazon's choice, and you get that nice little ribbon over your product, and that's the Amazon recommendation. Is that what you're?
Like when it comes to, like, these writers will write blogs about their content, and then Amazon will pick it up and say, like, this person said that these products are the best price, this is the best value, and Amazon will actually pick up these blog posts and write about them, or then put them on Amazon and put them as Amazon recommended editorial section, which is at the top of search results. I didn't know if you knew anything about it. It's interesting.
No, I don't know anything about that, but I use Amazon a lot. And so, like, as a consumer. And so that makes me wonder, though, how are they tying that in with user behavior? Because I'll be honest, I'm not ashamed of it. I'm on Amazon almost every day. I'm like, oh, we're out of dish detergent. Got to put that in the cart, whatever it might be. But if I'm not stumbling upon that content, I'm wondering how they are anticipating user behavior is going to lead to that, whether they're trying to leverage Google search and get it ranking, or if they're trying to put it in front of people via email or in product recommendations on those front sliders on the homepage. I don't know anything about that piece yet, but that has me
Yeah.
wonder, are they doing a good job? Because I haven't seen it yet.
Yeah, like, and it puts you at the top of the search results, so it gets you tons of sales, and it's just interesting. Amazon's changing all the time. Like, literally, there's so many aspects of them always coming up with new updates and changing that editorial section, and just always changing that process. So I was just curious if you, like, you just randomly knew something about it. So I did want to get this question across. What, in your eyes, makes a good blog or a good copy in a blog and a bad copy? We talked about the format and the formatting of each blog, but what do you consider good quality copy and bad quality copy? I'm curious on your perspective of what makes good copy and what makes bad copy within blog posts and content.
Yeah. Okay. That's a great question. And first, I'm going to clarify some language there. So you use the phrase copy. Copy is always referring to sales. So blog content is actually content and not copy.
Really?
which is a weird kind of distinction. When you go to a landing page that is encouraging you to buy, maybe it's answering those pain points, it's showing you social proof, it's showing you before and after pictures, that's copy because it's meant to sell. When something is meant to be informative and more relationship building, it's not copy because it's not selling you, it's content. So in your blog content, what makes it good versus bad, in my opinion, is there actual value to the reader? We've all stumbled upon these articles, blogs, website pages where you're reading and you're like, I am not getting anything out of this. This is just fluff. This feels like it was written maybe not in my native language and then it was translated and I see it's just kind of stuffed with keywords and there are links on things where it doesn't make sense for there to be links.
Yeah.
That type of content was created purely to satisfy Google, not to satisfy humans. And that is my biggest pet peeve in the content marketing world, is people forget about the biggest factor, which is the human who is experiencing that content. You can do everything in the world to make Google happy. You can get at the very top of the search page. You can have all of the boxes checked on Yoast. Everything could be green. But then if a human reads it and they hate it, they feel like they don't get any value out of it, they haven't learned anything, they didn't get the answer to their question, then your content really sucks. But when I'm creating content or when someone on my team is creating content and I'm approving it, the most important thing is this going to resonate with a human? Even if we have to sacrifice, for example, the keyword being at the front of the headline, I don't care about that if it reads weird. If someone reads it and they go, this is kind of awkward, I don't really know if, did a bot write this? When it feels clunky, it's not worth it. So sacrifice that SEO criteria and write for the human, because that's the person who's going to be clicking the buy now button.
Yeah, I want to get this point across when it comes to fluff. You talked about removing fluff. Fluff is so important to take out and on your content. Yes, it is important to have it when it comes to SEO to make sure that you check all the boxes a little bit. But if you want to add as much value as possible, it comes down to getting the point across as quickly as possible. And that's by going straight to the value point and adding as little amount as fluff, because your bounce rate is going to be higher if you have a lot of fluff. Or if people are reading and not really understanding, they're just reading the same thing kind of over and over, people are going to bounce, making your metrics hurt more. So it's important to take out that fluff and get to the point as quickly as possible, so that way you can dive right in and provide the value as fast as possible. Because once you provide value, then you win. In the brands game, if you provide value to that person, they are going to remember you. But if you have a lot of fluff in your content, not many people are going to read it, and they're just going to leave, and they're not even going to remember who you are. So the whole goal of your content should be for people to add value to the end customer, for people to remember who you are. So it's so important to remove that fluff and to really provide as much value as possible, going straight to the point.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why a lot of companies who are doing the DIY route with their content creation, they'll read these articles that say, your content has to be between 1,200 and 2,000 words, or, you've got to hone in on one specific keyword in this piece of content. It's got to be that length and you got to do all these things. Take that with a grain of salt, because as an example, we used to write for a company that does bamboo toilet paper, and they're on this sustainability mission. They're giving back to people in third world countries. They're a fantastic brand. But one of their SEO experts wanted us to write I think he wanted 1,400 words on the history of toilet paper. Nobody's going to read that, and nobody's going to click that. Whereas if we do something along the lines of, what's the difference between regular toilet paper and bamboo toilet paper? And we make it as long as it needs to be. Maybe we get our point across, we share all the valuable information, and it's 600 words. So be it. People will actually read that, enjoy it, share it, and possibly even buy from it. Whereas if we made it 2,000 words, they're going to scroll and scroll and scroll and feel bored and feel like, oh, these people are wasting my time. They're going to go elsewhere. So while SEO is important, I will be the first to say you have to have a strong SEO strategy. It doesn't come at the cost of your human user experience.
Yeah, always. You can optimize something to 100% every single time. You can optimize it for the algorithm, but at the end of the day, it only comes down to the humans and the relationships that you're making with your brand.
Yeah.
So it's so important to always establishing that relationship and always keep the customer in mind and not optimize for SEO too much, but do it a little bit and like know it enough. But at the end of the day, it's always about providing value. That's always what it comes down to. And so that way those people remember you, and that way you're just always having and establishing that brand. So that way you can increase your business and increase your sales.
Yeah. Optimize as far as you can without losing the quality.
Yeah, always. So yeah, that's all we have time for today. Ray, thank you for your time, and we're gonna end it from here. Hope you guys, if you have any questions, let us know. And thank you for your time, guys. Bye.
Thanks.